Well, folks, this morning's going to be an absolute ripper, leading your best life. Now, you say, Lee, you say that every time, but today's a special day because I'm talking with an old mate, Neil Cole. Neil and I go way back to university days at Melbourne Uni in 1975. I know you can't believe it. You say, Lee, how can you be that old? But the fact is, we've been on quite a journey, and Neil and I are going to share that with you today. But first of all, Neil, thank you so much for joining us on Leading Your Best Life.
Thank you, Lee.
Mate, you know what? Today, in particular, we're going to talk about your latest creation, Trials and Tribulations in Common Law. Neil Cole, a young lawyer's fight for justice in Australia through laughter and tears, discover the resilience of a community battling crime, poverty, and adversity. Mate, you've always had a big heart, and this book has so much in it about your heart and your connection with people. But look, before we get into the book, let's talk a bit about Neil Cole. In a nutshell, describe your story. Now, I know we can go on for days. You've got a great story. Tell us your journey, the Neil Cole story.
First of all, I graduated from law at the end of 1979. I did my articles to become a lawyer. And then after I became a lawyer, I went to work at the Flemington Legal. I set up the Flemington Kensington Community Legal Service. I worked there for 7 years. The book covers the first 2 years. And then I went into Parliament in 1988. I was also on the Melbourne City Council from 1985 to 87. And then I went into Parliament in 1988. I was in Parliament for 11 years, including 3 years as the Shadow Attorney General. And then I went and worked, when I left, I went and worked at the Mental Health Research Institute. I was diagnosed with bipolar mood disorder in 1993, and I went on to medications at that time, which were particularly helpful for the mania. I started in 1999, I started working at the Mental Health Research Institute with Professor David Kopoloff, and I did research into depression awareness campaigns and into schizophrenia. My work in schizophrenia has been ongoing for the last 20 years, and that involves getting people with schizophrenia involved in theatre productions or filming short videos. I've written 35 plays that have been produced. I've written lots of other videos and many other incidental things. And then I've written 3 books as well. So that's been the life's journey. The big change in my life was when I went on to lithium in 1993 and started to have my moods modified substantially. And that's when I found I could write dialogue and started to write plays.
Mate, it's been a journey, and you know we've been great mates since 1975. So every step of the way, as you're saying that, I remember each of those milestones along the way. Not the least of which is you coming over to Perth in 1993, and you had that tattoo on your arm. And I said, "What the hell happened there?" Because you said, "Well, I had 3 days where it kind of went blank." And I said, "Well, you were drinking," and because then you explained to me, and I went, "What the hell?" I'd never been exposed to anything like that, but because you were super brave at although you may not have called it brave at the time, because when your parliamentary colleague said, "Mate, once you announce you're on medication, your political career's over." But actually what happened, the complete opposite happened. What happened there when you announced publicly that you're on medication?
Yeah, just to backtrack a bit, it wasn't 1983, it was 1984 that I came over.
1984. Oh, was it? Oh, okay. Sorry, you're right. Okay, yep.
When I had the tattoo.
Yes.
And the tattoo was done actually in a state of depression.
Yes.
Why I did it, I do not know, but I did it.
What was the tattoo of? What was the tattoo of?
It's just a butterfly.
Okay.
But I would have got more tattoos, but I was scared because of the AIDS crisis at that time. So I've occasionally wanted to get tattoos, but I haven't done it. So it's usually when I'm either depressed or high mania. I was I went public about my illness in 1995. I had to resign my position because I had a dispute with the then leader. And then I went public about my illness because journalists were ringing me up and telling me what I had. So I told them that I had manic depression, is what we told them in those days, which is really bipolar mood disorder. But the biggest issue of all was not like, people make a big issue out of it, but it really wasn't a big issue for anybody else other than me, because I was the one who had to live with it, and it wasn't easy to live with. It caused enormous trouble and problems, but I still functioned reasonably well as a member of parliament.
Right. And I mean, ironically, a butterfly, of course, a butterfly in transition. We use the butterfly really is such a great metaphor for someone evolving, emerging, going from one state to another, going from maybe into a state of beauty. So the butterflies, whether it was conscious or unconscious or subconscious, what a marvelous metaphor, really for all of us, but particularly you. Really, I mean, I'm looking there because I made the note about that DARP project, Depression Awareness Research Project, which was way before Beyond Blue. And if we go back even earlier than that, I remember you put a book together, one of your first pieces of work, because you faced Jeff Kennett every day across the chamber, and you did a book that you gave me a copy of, a photocopied book called Democracy for Dummies. And you were basically having a fantastic crack at Jeff Kennett and the way he ran the state. And I remember you saying at the time, in a way, it was a way of helping you cope with being in that chamber every day, which at the time, if I recall, Kennett ran the joint. You talk to me about that Democracy for Dummy creation.
Well, it's actually called Government for Dummies.
Government for Dummy, okay.
The idea was to take all of his comments that he's made and condense it into one book based on the for dummies type books. But I think the important thing was it was a pretty bad time, and he was not only for me with my ill health, but also that he was it was so oppressive, and they were so obsessed with the power that they had, rather than governing properly. It was a real sort of performance piece. It was very unpleasant the way the way they operated, and that's of course why they lost government in the end.
Yep. Well, mate, I mean, there's so much there in that discussion. You know, as irony would have it, I mean, as you said, I don't remember what year it was you came over and said, Leigh, you've been in corporate education for so long. How do we get this message out around depression awareness in the corporate world? And then Peter Simons and you said, don't set up a trust. Don't set up it. We did it anyway. We went against your advice. But we tried to, and we did get the message out there into, we call it Positive Workplace Foundation. But essentially it was taking that key message of depression awareness or mental health awareness and looking to destigmatize it. So it's like, I mean, I remember in that early documentation, you said, if you break a leg or an arm, a physical illness, it's okay, but when it's invisible and it's mental, it's like, oh, well, let's not talk about that. And we actually got, by that stage, Kennett had Beyond Blue up and running, and he came over and spoke, and he literally talked about the fact that he said that his daughter had seen a spate of suicides down in the Western districts. He said, well, how the hell could someone get to that stage of, so he got kind of fascinated, or took it up as a baton. And I know you've got various names for Kennett and his relationship with the media, but he said after he was beaten in the election, he literally couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. So he had his own version of depression, which was quite ironic that, that he would himself begin talking about his relationship with, at least in his case, what he considered temporary mental ill health. So talk about life, karma, journey, quite incredible how that all unfolded. Your thoughts and comments on what I've just said.
Look, they were very bad people. that particular government. They were quite malicious and personal. They attacked a lot of people. They sacked a lot of people because they didn't like them. But also his constant sort of need for media and being the central focus came at the cost of proper government, and hence why he lost. The setting up of the Beyond Blue, well, that was giving him something to do. I don't think it was the right person for it. He's done a lot of damage to the whole issue. When you get a head of a depression awareness initiative, diagnosing people with bipolar mood disorder or saying that gay parents aren't good parents, and at the same time running for the leadership of the Liberal Party, it was just really bad. The fact that it turned out to be the way it did was got very little to do with, in substance, the look of it was quite good. We got funded for our what's called the Depression Awareness Research Project, which you mentioned, Leigh, and that project was funded by Beyond Blue. They put in $1.5 million, and we researched the best way to educate community about depression. And what you wanted is something that was long-term, and by far the best way was having individual contact with groups and people as well as individuals, telling what were the symptoms of depression. And we were going to base it on doing federal electorates. And if you got to 10 or 15% on a one-to-one basis, your chances were really high of it being transferred on. Unfortunately, they didn't fund it any further, largely because I think he had an issue with me. He was pretty disgusting, to be honest.
So it becomes politics and being personal.
And it was, but also it was such a great initiative, what we proved, and for it not to be taken up was really terrible. But the big thing they want, of course, is they want to promote Beyond Blue. So they go around talking about Beyond Blue, and they have the Beyond Blue Cup and so on. The problem is that promotes Beyond Blue. It doesn't do anything about promoting depression. Having said that, I don't want to be critical of them. They have got an important job to do, and they do it quite well.
Yeah, well, you have been such an important player in this. I mean, here we are. Even next week, our Blokes Talk Beachside initiative is on. We've got a major event. A speaker speaking, building a better brain, strategies for maintaining a healthier and happier brain. We've been running this initiative now for a year. Blokes getting together roughly once a month, talking about mental well-being, and literally we're saying, one of the blokes even in this photo said, I thought I was going through some pretty bad shit, and then I heard another bloke's shit, and I went, holy shit, I'm not the only one going through shit, and his shit is worse than my shit. Wow. And so there's incredible comfort in what you know as well as me, that the research shows 40% of men have never discussed with anyone what's going on in their inner world in terms of thought, upset, anxiety, depression. And as we know, something like 75% of suicides are men. Another guy in this photo is ex-SAS, and some of the post-traumatic stress that he's gone through. And literally he said, after one of the first meetings, just by talking to guys, the whole power of talking, the healing that goes on just through sharing. I didn't know about that, but there's real power in it. In an intimate group of guys just talking, this guy said, I had my first good night's sleep in years just after coming to one of these meetings. So, mate, it's quite incredible when you get people together. I mean, I'm sure what you're doing with the creativity, with the writing, with the film clips, the power of that as a vehicle to relieve or help the process, mate. So I thank you, because without you, I wouldn't be doing this. Here we are. When was DARP? What year was that? When did we start that? Was it in the 90s?
I came
Can't
over in
remember.
'84, and I came over again, I think, for a conference, and we caught up.
When was that? When did you introduce Simo and I to DARP? I remember you sitting in our
That
backyard and
that would have
sitting.
been 2005.
You're right. So almost 20 years ago, almost 20
Yeah,
years ago, we've been on this
yeah.
this journey, mate. Incredible. But let's get to talking about the book. What motivated you to write the book? And of course, those first two books, Colonel Surrey's Insanity, and what's the other one?
A Stability in Mind, which was
Stability
a
of
memoir.
Mind. So this
I've
one,
Yeah, this book was supposed to be a history of the Flemington Kensington Legal Service, but I can't write histories like that, but I could write a fiction book. So it's based on fact, but it's fiction. A lot of it's fiction. And what I did was I amalgamated many people into one character, so that otherwise it would be 500 pages long. So the crucial point is that it was a fictional story, which I enjoy doing, but it's based on fact. And so it's funny, it's sort of profound, it's tragic, it's all things really. And it's got good reviews so far. So,
oh, mate, it's marvelous. It's marvelous. And I mean, one, for me, it emanates your caring and your personality coming through the book, and your sense of justice and social justice and injustice. But you use the deeply human stories of people in Flemington and names. I'm just going to go at random. Just let me talk about The Loneliness of Mrs. Page. Give us a little insight into that chapter.
well, Mrs. Page was a pain in the backside, and she'd come to my office and she'd complain about, she was very right-wing. And you realised after a while that she wasn't coming in for legal advice, she was coming in because she was lonely.
Yeah.
And even though she was a pain to listen to, you sort of, you sort of become friendly, I suppose. And then I did lots of things to help her out. We've had great success stories with her. And so in the book, it's a bit of fiction, but in the end, we got her some money because a Coca-Cola crate had fallen on her head at a grocery shop. So I wrote to Coca-Cola, and not that they were really liable, and they sent back a check for $3,000. I organised tax avoidance stuff for her so she could get the pension, which I think I made a mistake in the book because there was no means test applied to war widows' pensions. So that's what Mrs. Page was about. And that was the story of being a community lawyer, coming with their legal problem, but you're looking at more individual problems and society in general, trying to change things to make it better for people like her.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you say, clearly, obviously, she was entitled to it if her affairs had been structured in the right way, and she didn't know about that. And you've helped her out, and as a war widow, she deserves a pension.
Yeah, well, yeah, she wasn't exactly. I think in retrospect, she wasn't a war widow, but I put that in, and I made a mistake because there was no means test, so it wouldn't have been necessary to do the trust. But I did it for a couple of other people. I didn't do it very often because it was really tax avoidance, but it just also seemed so unfair that there's this line that they draw, and you're only allowed to have X amount of money in the bank, and then you don't get the pension.
Yeah.
So that's what Mrs. Page was all about.
You're right. Let's talk about Christine Morgan.
Yep.
What happened with Christine Morgan?
Well, Christine Morgan is an amalgamated character, but basically it was the same. And it talked about the involvement with what was called the Sisters of Zion nuns. Yes. And there were 4 nuns who lived in the area. They lived in a house, and they looked after people. And I was very close to them, and we used to work hard trying to keep people out of prison, basically. And in Christine's case, she was on off and on of drugs, and she got charged by the police with unlawful possession of a camera. And in the real story is that it went to court and we defeated the charge. It's a terrible crime, stupid crime, unfair crime, unlawful possessions. So a police officer could walk into your place and say, where's the receipt for that camera? And you say, well, I haven't got it. Oh, well, it's unlawful possession. Now, unfortunately, Christine took her own life, either took her own life or overdosed. You never know. But that was after we'd done all that work. So it was pretty sad that she lost her life. But I didn't put in as many as I could have, but that was not uncommon at the time.
Yeah.
People to overdose on drugs. That's why when I got into Parliament, I had a strong belief in the need to reform laws in relation to marijuana and in heroin. It was just the most ridiculous thing that they were all treated as criminals.
Yes.
This is just a drug. You know, the biggest problem we had, of course, was alcohol, not any of the others. But the problem was the immediacy of the taking of heroin was such that people overdosed or they got infected or whatever.
Yeah.
But mostly, if we had programs, we've got methadone program, which is partially helpful, at the moment.
Mate, I can sense your sense of the need for justice, the injustice, particularly, as you say, in Flemington or in and around poverty. As you say, at the time, unemployment was incredibly high as well. So I know at one stage, somewhere in the book, you talk about the young men hanging around outside the pub, just getting pissed because they're unemployed. And then the police, all sorts of hassles with the police, almost a war, even to the point where there's that one situation where there was a particular policeman who's just clearly in the habit of just getting young guys and bashing them for his own thrill. Let's talk about David Lemke. I'm just opening up to chapter 25 at random here. Tell me about David Lemke.
Well, that story is all true. So it's almost verbatim as to what happened to David. That's not his correct name.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of those kids who was always getting in trouble. And he went to jail for an affray, as is pointed out in the book, where somebody was killed. And then, so I got quite close with him. It's hard to explain it, but you're working in a house in Flemington, and that's your legal service. It's not where the health centre was. So people could come in. And so some of them used to come in and talk to me. David used to come in all the time. And we got on well, and it was always, always good and always funny. There was always something happening we could talk about. And, unfortunately, he got into trouble with the affray. And then subsequent to that, after he got out of jail and he was doing all right, he got tied up with a guy who was an armed robber who they killed. The police shot him, killed him. And, he'd been mucking. The guy had been, handling, I went to court for him for an imitation handgun. So there was a lot tension around, and then he got shot by the police. And then, of all things, David got into a fight down at the Dudagalla, and the Turkish guy involved had a knife and stabbed him. And when it went to court, he was found not guilty which I think was legitimate, on the grounds of self-defense, because there was 4 others who were having a go at this Turkish guy. And David happened to be in the wrong place. So it's very sad. What the worst thing is, Leigh, you'd see it in your own life. You become, when you're working with people, you become very close to them. And as a community lawyer, you should really stand back, but it was very, very hard. So his death, when that occurred, you just sort of think, what a waste, and how some people just get on a roller coaster and they can't get off. And the role of the community lawyer in that circumstances is to help them get off the roller coaster. And you just got to stick with people. You said earlier on about you described my qualities, but the biggest quality I have is I'm totally naive. I was so naive, and I just went ahead believing that by working with kids, working with single mums, setting up tents and all this, you're going to improve their life or keep them out of jail. And that did happen. So it was worthwhile. It was very valuable. But the system is so weighted against people on low incomes and certainly the unemployed. But the system is also, it was male dominated, it was sexist, it was misogynist. They were the most stupid laws, which are like in that, the stupid laws that used to apply to people. And police always wanted more power, and they were shocking to deal with sometimes. They're just disgusting. But in the book, I do tell the story of Sergeant Peter Toomey, who's a real character. He's dead now. And he was a tough customer, but we worked really well together in the court, even though, we had our moments. So it's a lot about working in a community where you've got the same prosecutor, the same magistrates, the same kids going to court. So being involved at that level was very, very important, and it still is for me, but I'm now involved more with people with mental illness. But, I just go back to your thing where you're talking about having blokes talk to each other. Like, sometimes it's very hard because blokes, not only do they not talk, but they say the most stupid, inane comments, It's all this banter that goes on. And I find it really hard because I just don't like that sort of thing. And people think they're funny and they're really not. So there's an enormous barrier with men, not so much with women, of this stupidity and comments. I think in a way, Leigh, what's been important in what you're doing to me when we did that conference with
Maria
Halpin,
Meetings for Minds last year.
Fantastic, because they reached out. It was very broad. But when you were talking about your swimming, the going down to the beach, and you have 400 people now who do it, I think that sort of vehicle where you can bring people together and have a coffee afterwards is probably better than some sort of men's group.
Sure.
Because I think that brings people out more, but also it's got a biochemical basis to it. Exercise is so good for you, but if you're doing it with other people, you've got the interactions that can improve people as well. So the thing about men's health is a big issue, but it's not as big as women's health is, and depression and so on. The biggest problem we have is those people who don't respond to medication. So often just drawing people out through discussion, they can discover, gee, I should go and get treated for depression. And often it's not. If they go on medications, it'll work. But if they're really severe, well, it doesn't. But the other thing is the exercise per se is good for your mental health.
Absolutely, mate. I mean, look, I was just saying to Shane, the founder of Pod Squad this morning, how beautiful the community is. Every day, like today, I think we made 30 or 40 people out swimming with us. It's quite rough. And men, women, all sorts of things. One of the new girls were talking. She said she's what did she say? She's a podiatrist and a personal development coach, and she runs a podcast. And we said, well, she said, I should interview you. I said, I should interview you. And as we were talking, she said, yeah, I've been through a lot of change the last couple of years. I broke up with my husband. I came out as gay, et cetera, et cetera. And I talked about, I said, I had an uncle that, was gay in the 60s in Bendigo who committed suicide. I said, look, if that's where you're at, then that's fantastic to come out. And the conversations that we have over coffee afterwards, and you've all been out in the ocean together. I mean, at some level, you know, it's slightly risky because it's lumpy, there are sharks, all those things. By being out of our comfort zones together, the connection is much deeper. And I think you're right. In terms of Blokes Talk Beachside, the fact that the guys come to a meeting is the first step. And in the meetings, there's all sorts of realizations go on, not the least of which is, you know, they go, well, shit, someone else is going through stuff the same or worse than me. I'm not alone, which is a very important part of the I'm not alone in this. And we've got guys going off the back of that. I'm going to seek treatment. Another guy literally did go into whatever they're called. Like he was 5 or 6 weeks. He was in a centre, the Marion Centre. Even went to the point of needing ECG, you know, convulsive stuff to start sparking. He literally said to me, I was producing no serotonin and dopamine. He'd been grieving so much about a breakup in a relationship that he got to the point of producing no serotonin and dopamine, and now on medication. And so that journey, this guy, you know, there's no doubt he would not have been around had he not done that. And one of the other guys who was there literally the other night said, who had been a swimmer and a rower, and he said, I'm going to come to Pod Squad based on the stuff that was said here tonight. One of the other guys in the group is in Pod Squad said, mate, it's keeping me going. You know, Lou Reed in the song Perfect Day, you just keep me hanging on. What do you do to keep hanging on to give yourself a chance to keep moving forward? And certainly Pod Squad, for me too, is so important in help me keep me hanging on to keep me moving forward. So well, it's really is that
get back just to, I'm sorry, just with David Lemke.
Yes.
When David, there was very little mental illness issues back then.
Mm-hmm.
Very few of the clients I went to court for had mental illness issues. And it's only of late that we've really started to look at issues like depression and how that affects criminality, and it almost has become a little bit too much of an excuse, if you like, for some of the behaviours. But I also think the difference between what you're doing and other groups is that you've got a biological basis to what you're doing. Exercise, doing the swimming, with your background in human performance, your knowledge of what is needed, that's what's crucial. And the days of when you were doing swimming and the coach would swear at you or go mad at you, telling you to go faster or whatever, and also the negativity that they offered. So they'd say, oh, you're hopeless, you should have done better or whatever. Whereas now I think we're looking at more positive, and we don't say things like, you know, oh, this guy I know, he said one time with my sons, he said, oh, you're as ugly as your father.
Oh, my God, yeah.
No, but this is supposed to be funny. But it's not funny. And my son, Declan's a Butte kid, but he takes things literally.
Sure.
So to him, he was upset that they'd say that I was ugly. I don't consider myself a good-looking person. I'm not saying that. But there's so much banter and negativity that people don't get to the core of the problem, and we don't realise that sort of banter is doing us a lot of damage.
Yep.
I find it very hard to cope with these days. I've always found it hard, but now I just shut off to it and don't say anything. People say the most. You can see it even when you're doing a book. You know, going to the book launch, the differences, what people will say, rather than encourage or be supportive. So we've got a shocking milieu of males. Women don't do it. I've never noticed it anyway. But men will, or some women do. Some women do. But you know, there's a mentality of negativity, which is part of our culture, which I think is a large part of the reason why we have the number of deaths through domestic murders is because of this inability to sort of accept we are men, and you don't have to be in domination. You don't have to be making fun of people all the time. Like I've written 35 plays and I've written a lot of comedy. So I know about comedy. I know how to write it. But there's one story which I just to divert for a second of when I was in this guy. He didn't like me very much. He went to court and he got 3 months jail. But and he blamed me for it. But he sent me a letter, which the joke's there. He sent me a letter. It said, "Dear Neil, without your legal skills, I wouldn't be where I am today. Yours, Dale Abdullah, Her Majesty's Prison, Pentridge." So, but ironically, Leigh, I went down to see North Melbourne train one day and Dale was there.
Mhm.
And I thought to myself, oh, no, don't have to deal with him. And he said to me, he said, "Neil, you were right." And I said, "What was I right about?" And he said that I was wasting my life.
Oh, wow.
And he spent 9 years in jail.
Goodness.
And I said, "Well, are you going to go back?" And he said, "No." He said, "I'm not going to." He went on methadone program and he's still doing well. So
Wow.
it's interesting. You know, that's why I wouldn't utter a negative to people like that, which is the natural inclination. People say things. And rather than do that, it's best to look at ways in which we can draw people out
Yeah.
without smart aleck remarks.
Yep.
As I said, I have lots of humorous capacities, as you know. When we were laughing our head off when we wrote Billy Thorpe and Leigh.
Billy Thorpe and Leigh. Mate, let me share the screen on that while you're talking about it. Absolutely. A whole lot of there's blokes talk, but I'm going to go back to Billy Thorpe and Leigh, Neil Cole Playwright. That's the book. Where is it? There it is. Billy Thorpe and Leigh, the play we did back in 2016, mate.
Yeah. It was sad. It didn't do as well as we would have liked, but it was a very good play.
And we had a lot of laughs, as you say. This charming production opens and closes with Thorpe's signature song. Most people I know think that I'm crazy, and immediately has your toes tapping. Frank Kerr's renditions of the iconic tunes are delightful. Thorpe's distinctive music and voice are difficult to emulate, but the show is not concerned so much with the recollection of Thorpe himself as it is with showing the importance of his influence on a generation of aspiring youth. Leigh, played by Andrew Doyle, is a devoted fan in his journey from meek country boy to a young, confident adult. I'm getting teary just thinking about it, mate.
Yeah.
Lee's supportive mother. You made my mum, Shirl, the star, mate. Harleen Hercules did a marvellous job, didn't she? Providing such a, mate, that was just incredible. To sit next to my mum on opening night, watching her be the star of the show was just incredible. Just incredible. I thank you. I thank you 1,000 times.
See, Leigh, people don't realise, you know, how tough it was for somebody like your mother.
Yep.
That's the thing. That for them it was they survived week by week.
Yeah, absolutely.
The debate was whether they're going to be eating or not.
Yes.
And they because of your dad's illness, they battled on pension. People don't realise how hard it was for her, but also how I always felt envious because you had such a loving environment in which you grew up.
Yes.
Your dad and your mum. You know, and you were never admonished or treated badly, or you know, and I think that is reflected in your life.
Yeah.
You know, you as a person. And so it was very important, I think, that we look, you know, that to me, writing the play, even though it didn't do as well as we would have liked, brought a lot of joy to a lot of people. And I remember being at your place rewriting it after we did the reading, and you were looking at me because I kept on laughing my head off at everything I was writing. So, you know, the point is that I know about comedy and I know how to do it. But I think in our society, like doing something like that, like to see your mother have that sort of response, you know, it's just fantastic.
Oh, mate,
really good. Yeah.
Mate, and I put a photo book together because my old school teacher Piercy was there. old mates from Perth were there. It was just incredible. And you know, the show was a very moving show. There's no doubt, and the way you threaded various Thorpe songs through there would be, you know, besides most people I know, just, you know, just it was so beautifully done. Let's hope someone does it again at some point. But what have I got at Facebook there? There is Billy Thorpe and Leigh. There it is. There you are with Mum.
Yeah. I'm
Beautiful,
bigger
mate.
there than I am now.
Well, that's right. That's you and your running, mate. And there's Harleen, the woman that played Mum.
Yeah,
That was
that's right.
fantastic. There we all are. But that's Billy Thorpe's wife, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Daughter,
right.
I think. Yeah. Thorpe's wife. Oh, mate, what a night. There he are. There's Mum hugging the guy that played me, I think. There he is. Like, what a memory. It's so good photos. And there's the director, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mate, so many great.
I don't think that's the director. I
Okay.
don't know.
No, anyway, what a great night. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. There they are at rehearsals. Mate, what a show. So a thought that comes to mind, I'm going to hit you with this, is this question of all of these things you've done, what motivates Neil Cole? What motivates and drives Neil Cole, and why?
Oh, look, I'd have to say, Leigh, that the thing that motivates and drives me is, in fact, this ability to write, to take lots of information and convert it into a play or a book. So I'm motivated more than anything by that joy of doing that. Like, I thought when I was doing the Essendon play last year that I said, I'm not going to do anything more. I'm going to stop all this. And then I just thought, I couldn't do it. So I wrote the book, and then I've just finished another play about Don Dunstan, and I've got another one I'm going to do about adoptions, people in the adoption system, from about a woman named Pauline Toner, who was the first cabinet woman to be in cabinet in Victoria. So it really is a very central thing to me. I'm not motivated by, the need to help people anymore or the need to change the world. I'm still like that, but I'm not quite as I was. And, you pay a price for those things too. I could have been, a big lawyer and paid all my, but I would have only spent it on things that I didn't, bigger houses or whatever. So motivation, really, the big motivation is the inner drive of creativity. And I do have my schizophrenia project, working with people with schizophrenia. We do creative things, but that's not as important as as just my ability to do the creative. Like, we've had, I don't know how many years we've been doing it, and I've written all the scripts for that. And they're very funny and they're very important for the people to be involved with. So it's a bit egocentric, but certainly the desire to write and to do my creative work is the motivation. That inspires me. And my sons, of course, my sons Eamon and Declan, I'm pretty much, dedicated to them most of the time. They're very important to me, as everybody's kids are, but that I value having them nearby me and being with them often.
Mate, I did a podcast a while ago with a woman called Shana Davis, I think, but she introduced me to the term, which won't be new for you, but she deals with, she says people with neurodiverse talent. In other words, they've got what we would call various neurological disabilities, but on the other side of it is their ability to create and produce and think in so many different ways. And clearly, in one way, you're bipolar. It really is a neurodiverse gift, because when you spoke at that conference that Maria and Meetings for Minds ran last year, what became clear to me is that the writing, because your mind is so active in so many different ways, the writing becomes almost a form of meditative focus, that you're focusing on one thing at that point in time, and it brings a level of calmness to you that at other times you don't have. And so I as you say, if you didn't write, that would be almost like a form of therapy gone. But on the other side of it is this incredible capacity. And of course, when we Google people with bipolar or mental illness who are creative, everyone from Robbie Williams, it goes on and on. There's this massive list of people who've done so much for humanity and creativity that without their neurodiversity, they wouldn't have, bipolar, their mania, they wouldn't have created as much or to the quality that they have. So have you thought about that at all as your bipolar as like a neurodiverse gift?
I've written papers on it.
Yes, great.
Plays on the link between creativity and mental illness. I think in what she's talking about is much more general. So you, for instance, a person who's got schizophrenia or who's depressed, they may be attracted to certain things because they're creative, and you use that part of you enjoy doing what you do. The trouble is finding what suits the people, whether it's doing videos or doing theatre, or even singing in a choir, for example.
Yes.
So I think there's a clear link between creativity and mental illness. There's an associated thinking that goes with it. So it's a way of converting or translating particular information and making it theatrical or funny. So, and also, of course, if you're high, you turn into a bit of a smart aleck with puns and other things, and it's not very pleasant to be around. But the fact is, it can be quite stimulating to hear it, for other people to hear it as well. But it's not really a good place to be, because you turn into a bit of a smarty. But I think from the woman's point of view, what she's talking about is very important. It's how you utilise that. And it's like everything. There's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
And to come along and say, creativity and mental illness, that's the way to go. Well, I'm creative, but I've got a background of it with my father to an extent, but certainly my grandfather. So there has always been something about my ability to write, which is genetic. But finding the right person, the right therapy for the person is the hard issue. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, we all come to the table with our particular version of therapies.
Yes.
So psychologists will have this therapy or that, whereas what we need to do is match the person to the therapy. And certainly in the case of creativity, you got to throw it out there and see whether people take it on board. Like you don't, like we had when we're down at the flats in Flemington, they had a project of women in theatre, and it was really pretty ridiculous. They were doing blowing up balloons and all that. Anyway, they wrote a play called Women Against Drama.
Mm-hmm.
So that came from the fact that it wasn't really what they needed or wanted, but in fact, in the end, it was very creative because it created an anti-drama.
Hilarious. I just found Shana Jarvis is the lady's name, founder, director at Micro Enterprise Launchpad. So the neurodiverse people have said they've got a little business helping people with neurodiverse talents create little businesses. They're making different bits of art and T-shirts. And she said one of her missions, she came from the corporate world, and she said, these people with these disabilities were getting something like $2 an hour working for the airlines, putting food and sandwiches in airline packets, is because there was no industrial relations that covered them, and basically big companies were getting to use them almost as slave labor. She go, what the hell? It's 2024, and So that became part of her mission. So she's doing some great work. And even she says, I've had ADHD my whole life. And so she she's got her own neurodiverse challenge. So she's a wonderful person doing great things. Mate, let's talk about for a second, you and running and exercise and your journey there in terms of physical and mental well-being, because when we started this back in 1975, you weren't so much into the running in 1975, but over the last 20 years or so, it's become a major part of your daily and weekly routine. Would you like to share a bit about what you're doing there and what happened and what the impact is?
I've been running for 20 years. My running coach, Bob Smith, he was an anaesthetist, and he used to run. He was always run, and he ran 800 meters. He came second to Ralph DeBell, who went on to win the gold medal in the 1968 Olympics. What's important is I started from nothing. I've never been a sports person. As much as I loved playing sport, I was hopeless. Football, cricket, no, I was just hopeless. Even golf, I loved it, but I wasn't any good at it. So I went to it with a pretty clean slate. And so starting it when I was 47, and I discovered that I learned how to run. So you learn, you've got to warm your body up, you warm your heart up, you do interval training. So I've been doing interval training for 20 years. We do Monday and Thursday nights. We're going out this afternoon. And that's the short distance spurts. What's been the benefit? And I want to emphasize this, it's not a panacea, but exercise, particularly what I'm doing, gives you a great sense of accomplishment. It gives you better health. However, and on the depression front, medications are what makes the difference for me. But if I'm feeling low and I go running, inevitably the depression will subside or go away altogether. So doing the running concentrates your mind and also gives you a sense that you can improve with it. So I went from doing jogging 200 meters, Bob would test my pulse, jogging another. Then over time, I built it up to do 1K without stopping. And then I ended up being, the big achievement was doing 2 laps of the Princes Park, which is 6 kilometres. And then I've run in fun runs, and I had my heart operation 2.5 years ago. So I haven't been running in distance stuff, but I'm doing the interval training. And it's been really important to me. It's
helped you with your sugar diabetes as well, right?
Oh, it helps. Yeah, it helps, but it's got nowhere near eating the proper food. But I've found it to be very rewarding. It's like a hobby. Running became a hobby. I was running on weekends. I went on a run on the weekend, not at your level, what you're doing, swimming, but it's still important.
Absolutely, it's important. But beautiful. I mean, because I remember, back in the 70s, we were all running around at Medley Hall, because we were there at Medley Hall in Drummond Street, Carlton, and all the guys we'd run, me, Chapo, and a whole pile of us would run around Exhibition Gardens and other places. And at that stage, you weren't into running. And I do remember one day driving past the Exhibition Gardens. It would have been maybe in 76, 77, 78. And there I saw you running, and I went, oh my God, that's fantastic. Curls is running. So that would have been very early on.
If I'd had somebody who was a coach like Bob is to tell me about running, then I would have been able to do it much more effectively. Like I didn't know things like warming your body up meant getting your heart right. I didn't know that you could do interval training, that you need to do interval and distance. You can't just do the distance. You do the interval training, builds up your strength and the small fibers. But I tried, but I wasn't an athlete. That's the trouble. Some people are very good at it, some people are not. And I just was no good at it. Even as a runner, I'm only a plodder. I do it, but compared to people my own age, I'm probably fitter than most people.
No doubt
But
about
very
it.
few could do, like we tonight will do, well, the other day we did 500 meters times 5 of them or 6 of them on 2 minutes something. So it's not fast, but it's good. Yeah, it's a good speed. So,
Absolutely, mate.
but I think exercise, relaxation are very, very important for people with depression in particular. Exercise is just, because then it's sort of the opposite to what you want to do. When you're depressed, you just want to do nothing. So,
Mate, I'm thinking one of the questions I like asking people, besides rules and routines to help them be physically and mentally healthy, is say, if we are what we eat, take great care of what we feed our brains. So in terms of books, I know you're a great reader. What are some of the books you're reading at the moment or listening to on podcast or Audible? Just give us a bit of an insight into some of the books that are beside your bed or wherever you do your reading.
yeah, well, they're there. I'm reading the book that my son gave me for my birthday called March of the Patriots, about Paul Keating and John Howard. I'm reading a book called Sapiens,
Yes.
about the development of human, which is a tremendous book. And I've been writing the books about Don Dunstan, obviously, because I was writing the play. So I tend to not read fiction. I love when I do read fiction, but I tend not to. And sometimes I think it's a waste of time, because there's so much that I can read that I'll get knowledge from.
Yeah.
So I read a lot of books, but a lot of them are, are non-fiction. So
Sure.
most of them would be non-fiction, but I do enjoy reading, and I enjoy biographies occasionally. So.
Just on that, reading routine, I'm just interested in, reading routine. When do you read? In the mornings? Do you read it late at night? Do you sit in a chair in the middle of the day? When and how do you
Bit
read?
of everything, but I read in bed mostly now.
Mm-hmm.
And if I've really got a good book, I'll take it and read it prior to going for the run. But lately with the run, I've been listening to music before I go out for my run to get me motivated and inspired.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Fantastic, mate. It's always useful to know what people's routines are. But just on that, let's talk about now, because we've been going over an hour. So I said an hour, we've almost used up our time. What does the future hold for Neil Cole? If we're talking about the future, what does it look like for you?
I just will move more and more into playwriting, and I won't spend as much time doing other things. I'm also actively involved in the mood disorder unit at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. That's to deal with people with difficult to treat depression, people that don't respond to anything. So trying out new methods. So I'm going to help raising funds, I hope. And so that's a really important thing for me, is the depression program. But writing plays and just keeping myself on, continue to run as much as I can, trying to keep my weight off, which is always a challenge. But they're the main things. Like, I'm pretty happy. I must say, I bought my doctor, GP, some flowers last year and the year before. And she said to me, "Oh, you really don't need to," but it was really nice. And I said, "Oh, well, you've been pretty good to me." And I said, "You're the only woman I give flowers to these days anyway. Give it to my doctor and say, here, thank you for another year." So I think, just taking it a bit more one day at a time than I've ever done, because I'm 67 now, and you think, I don't need to be pushing myself or proving anything, although I'm still want to prove. I want my plays to be successful, but the success is it can be done in money terms or popularity or whatever. But I'm doing what I enjoy doing, and I don't worry so much about. I wouldn't engage in expensive productions anymore. So. But otherwise, just keep going. No material things. I don't really want to. Yeah, that's about it, Lee.
Brilliant, mate. Now, as we move towards a close, is there anything we haven't discussed or anything you'd like to cover before we move into the home straight?
No, that's okay. Just the books on neilcole.au.
Yes, I'm going to literally, thank you for reminding me of that. I'm going to show people right now. I've got it there somewhere. Facebook, there's the Billy Thorpe and Leigh. Neil Cole, there it is. neilcole.au, there it is. You can buy a copy of the book right there, folks. neilcole.au. Just hit buy and get yourself 1, 2, 3, 5, or 10 copies. And then share them around. Beautiful, mate. Beautiful. So in terms of my notes, let me just look at what I've written here, mate. Creativity as therapy, neurodiversity as a gift, the butterfly. What a transformation of you, the continual evolution, and at the same time, your writings helping others. The power of the medication, as you say, but lithium since 1993, running as a routine, 35 plays, depression awareness research project, and of course it sparked me. Here I am involved with Blokes Talk Beachside now. Government for Dummies. It all started. It all started. I never forget you giving me that book, and of course all of our great times, and of course again the Billy Thorpe and Leigh play, mate, and what that was just such a beautiful life experience for us both, and my mother and my whole family. So, mate, thanks for being a mate. Thanks for being on this podcast.
No.
Pleasure, mate. And we'll get this out, share it around, and you can share it with your network as well. And again, folks, get yourself a copy of this book, Neil. And again, I'm looking forward. Don Dunstan was a superhero of mine as well, mate. A Labor man, broke many barriers in his time and did a lot of great. People loved him in South Australia, that's for sure. So great work on the play, let alone all the other fantastic plays you've done. And I look forward to our mateship continuing for the next 20 years.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate. See you again soon.